Speak today about a very, very fascinating shaila that was once came into my hands. The question held from Durham, and I'm going to be speaking about this shaila in South Africa upcoming days. So I'm revisiting it so that there should be a recording of this shir. The question was as follows. I'm going to put this shaila today in Rand, since I'm going to be speaking in South Africa. I got a phone call from somebody who, very honest person, but a problem with using viewing inappropriate websites on the internet. Made a netter. Today I believe it's 15 rand, 16 rand to the dollar. Let's call it 15 rand. So 1,500 rand is $100. That's 1,500 rand for every inappropriate website that he would open up, and it worked for about half a year successfully, preventing him from opening up the wrong websites. But then one day the Yetzer Hara came in, and in 2 days he looked at 2,000 inappropriate websites. You do the math, in dollars it comes to $200,000. In rand, that'd be 3 million rand. And he called me up that he would asking me to try to find a heter to this netter so that he wouldn't be obligated to pay $200,000 to tzedakah. I said, no problem. Chetzi lachem, chetzi lashem. We'll half the money give to my kollel, and half the money will redeem you, and then we'll be right. He said, that would be a good idea, but I don't have that much money. It's difficult for me to give $180. So that option did not pan out. But so we had to look for plan B. And plan B was to make for the netter. So I went into the sugi a little bit. And I saw some very interesting things which I'd like to share with you today. The question, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, is such a netter even valid? We know there's a famous principle in halacha called asmachta lo kanya. Asmachta lo kanya means that smachta comes from samach, smichos das, relying on something. A person gambles. It's a machlokas, it's a dispute among the Rishonim, but according to a lot of Rishonim, there's no kinyan, there's no acquisition, because a person doesn't have person thinks he's going to win. A person plays poker, thinks he's going to win, puts the money in the pot, however you play poker, and then when he loses, he doesn't really have gemiras das, he doesn't have full intention to give you the money because he was playing to win, not to lose. And perhaps it's the same thing in such nadarim. And this is in fact the psak of the Rivash in Siman Reish Pei Aleph. The Rivash writes, Shlo nadar b'leiv shalim, shebishas haneder lo ha'isa kavanaso, sheyitzvuk v'yavar al shvasa, v'yitzchayiv b'knas. He was not planning to transgress the knas, the fine, right? So he's not even obligated if it was giving to tzedakah, like this case. So according to Rivash, this question doesn't start, and therefore he's off the hook. The thing is, though, the Maharam, the famous Maharam Rittenberg in Siman Reish Gimel, paskins, right? Hi darminin amirasul gvok misras hediet perish, but misira amuels hediet kikinyan based in chashiv. So we have a rule in Asmach that if you make with a kinyan based in chashiv, if it's with the acquisition of a based in chashiv, of an important based in, then it does work. And therefore, says the Maharam, we look at this netter in Ristaka, which it was a netter to tzedakah. If he had just made a netter to give, money for some throw in the garbage, that would have been different. But since it was a netter for tzedakah that he made, then that was a problem. And the Trumas Hadeshin in Chelik Beis, which is Psakim, Siman Nun Gimel, rules like this Maharam. He says, near the Sugi the Alma Pas Maharam. So he passed like the Maharam. And therefore, the first level of this shaila, every question that we get in halacha, we always have to go to the root. The first root, is there even a question? And the answer to the first one is that there is a question. There is a shaila here. This netter was chal. When Ploni Almoni made a netter to give $100 every time he opens up an inappropriate website, then the netter was chal. So there is a netter here. So the next question here is, can you annul a netter of staka? Can you annul a neder of staka after it's already been made? And once again, we come across the machlokas rishonim. The Mordechai in Gittin, Shinai and Dalit, Remesh Shinai and Dalit writes, he brings a Yushalmi, brings a little bit story of a person who used to make money gambling, yeah, and he made a neder to stop himself, and he got too much for him. He had to gamble, his fingers were just wanted to, roll dice, but they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him. And the Mordechai brings a raya here that you can't be made for a neder against gambling, even though it seems like he was going to gamble anyway. He was a what do they call it? Addicted gambler. He was addicted to gambling. He was going to gamble anyway. Too bad. He's going to be over his neder. We don't care. Comes along the Shuta Rashba, and the Rashba says somebody who made a neder not to be Masachib B'Kovia, not to roll dice, gambling, and he comes to ask to be made for the neder, right? Also says the Rashba that we're not made for the neder. We're not made for the neder. There's a Rashba in Shuva, Chelik Avos Simin Tafshin Nunei Tishna. Also, same thing as the Mordechai, we don't be made for such a neder. Yet we find the Orchos Chaim, one of the great Rishonim, I believe Orchos Chaim Eluniel, in Hilchos Nadarim, Halacha Yud Gimel. He writes, he brings from Tosfos, that if you know that the person does not have the kochos hanefesh, you just can't do it. He doesn't have that inner strength not to think, then we will be made for the neder. So we see it's a machlokas rishonim, but the thing is we paskin like the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Mordechai and the Rashba. They can't be made for the neder. Right. Comes along the Ramah and he cites the Orchos Chaim that you can be made for the neder. Someone who can't control himself. He's a obsessive gambler, maybe they call it. And the Shut Kuf Gimel explains himself a little more. He says an amazing idea. According to this generation, everyone will agree. Yeah? Because why? Because the challenges, and the Ramah, how long it will go did the Ramah live? You want to know? I'll look it up right now. The Ramah and Ramosha Israelis lived in Krakow. He lived in Krakow. Let's see. So Ramah lived in Krakow. I'm not finding it, but listen. The Shulchan Aruch was born in 1488. He lived in 1488. Okay, so around over 500 years ago, the Ramah lived. And he said already at his time that people are not able to control themselves when it comes to these types of okay, here we go. We have Shutar Ramah here and biography. Okay, but Moshe ben Isserlis was born in 1525, according to some 1530 in Krakow. He died in 1572. He was an outstanding halachic authority, had rabbinic court in yeshiva. He wrote Tagwas on the Shulchan Aruch. He also authored responsive works about philosophy and Kabbalah. Okay. Anyway, over 500 years ago, the Ramah lived, and already at that time, there was obsessive gamblers. He writes, everybody would agree, even the Rashba and the Mordechai would agree today to this halacha. Right. And, okay. So we find a little bit later from the Shut Marami Mintz, as long as we're getting historical today, let's see when did he live. Shut Maram Mintz. Okay, the Marami Mintz lived. He lived, in 1415. even before the Ramah. Yeah, even before the Ramah, the Marami Mintz. So Marami Mintz has a responsa, a tshuva. It's in Siman Ayin Gimel, about a person who made a neder not to ride horses. It seems that was the big time in those days, horse riding, horseback riding. And yeah, he talks about giving it to Hektish. But he says an interesting point. He says there are two parts of the neder. There's the money part and the Isser part, right? So the thing is like this. The postscript want to suggest here that even so, according to Amoy, could for sure be made for this neder. Yeah, according to the Maram, it could be that you could be made for the money part, even though you can't made for the Isser part. Right? And this was in fact supported. Yeah, this is in fact supported by other Gedolei Rishonim. Yeah, right. The Chuvas Harash and Simeon Beis and Beis. It can be made for such a neder. It can be made for such a neder. Right. We find in the Rabbi Kiva Eger brings the Radvaz. Rabbi Kiva Eger bring in Piskei Tshuva, Hilchos Nadarim, he brings the Radvaz who says, "Can you make a neder in any sukkah?" Now look, this person vowed 3 million rand or $200,000 to stucca, and I'm sure myself and any other stucca organization would be very happy that this neder should be fulfilled. Can you be made for an idri stucca, right? And he says you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. Shim nishal, shemutter delot, right? But you can do it. You can do it. It's mutter to do it. But he says someone who does it, he's chayiv nidoy. It's not a good idea. Why? Because you're master daniyim, right? You're master daniyim. So that's the problem. It's mutter, but you shouldn't do it. Comes along the rush, Klal Chesed and Dal, and he says, but what if you don't have any money? Right? You shouldn't do it. But you shouldn't do it. It's because you're master daniyim. But what if the guy doesn't have any money to pay up his neder? So then he's stuck. Yeah. So if you don't have any money to pay up your neder, the Rush implies you can do it. It's an Aruch HaShulchan in Siman Reish Ches of Chaf Gimel. He says Devade, right? If you could be Omed, then he won't do the thing again, right? Right? Right. But let's say that he's just too stingy. Imachachem Roy, then he shouldn't be mafid. But if he sees that he can't do it, what is he going to do? He's going to work. He's getting a second mortgage on his house in order to pay it up. Then you can do it. Hakol fi Inyan, says the Gemara, which is the very famous Klal in Halacha. Hakol fi Inyan. And the Marubach adds here in what Rebbe Kiva Eger there on the Shulchan Aruch Reish Ches Yud. He says, what was the guy's intention? His intention was to make a siag on himself, right? And not to take a second mortgage on his house. So this is really the problem. This is what I heard at the time from my Rebbe Umari of Zalman Nechemia Goldberg Zatzal, that, and Rav Tzvi Kushlevsky and other Gedolim also agreed, you can't be made for this neder. You can't annul this neder because he's just going to go back to looking at inappropriate websites. So they based on the Rambam in Hilchos Story. Bia says, Chav Beis Chav Aleph says that a person only has these improper thoughts if he's not involved with Torah. They said if he takes upon himself to learn 2 or 3 hours a night in kollel, in a night kollel, and I hope that he's still doing that, then you can be made for the net. So this is the sum up in summation. A netter, such a netter for Knas Ischal, to make a fine. There's a question or not in the Rishonim if you could annul such a netter. It's a dispute between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. The Ramah suggested maybe everyone agrees you can make for it today because of the weakness of the generation. Although we said that there's a difference between the money part and the Issa part. It could be the Issa part, maybe not, and the money part, yes, because you run into a problem of not stumbling again in the area that he stumbled in. And therefore, You should be very careful before you annul such a neder. But in such a case, as a case that came in front of me, the person didn't have any money, so it was they permitted him. By the way, this was took months and months before we came to a final decision. A lot of back and forth between the person and the Gedolim, and it was not simple at all. So we came out with this conclusion. But we should all take to heart. Number one, be careful about the internet. It's it's not called the web for nothing. It pulls you in. And you start with watching Rabbi Travis' shirim on Tarni Time or any of the other wonderful shirim that are there. And eventually you might wind up in the wrong places. That's number one. Number two is that be careful with Nadarim. Even if you think you're for sure going to be able to stand up in Nadarim, be very careful. Think 3 or 4 times before you make such a neder. Hashem should give us the greatest siyata d'shmaya to be careful with Nadarim. It's the one thing that we do twice before Yom Kippur. We do it once on Erev Rosh Hashanah and once on Yom Kippur called Nidre. And the Svarim say because Nadarim are very, very dangerous. We have 613 mitzvahs and that's enough. We don't have to create new mitzvahs on ourselves. Only in very, very extenuating circumstances. Be very careful before you make any neder at all. Hashem should help us to be very careful in this area. Amen. Kain Yeh Ratzon.